My father pushed me down the stairs and hissed, "Get rid of it!" like my baby was trash and not a human life. I still hear those words when the house is quiet. And the scary part is, he didn't say it in anger. He said it like a decision he'd already made. But that wasn't the worst part. Because 90 seconds later, the front door opened, and the one person he swore was too far gone to speak a full sentence walked in and looked him in the eye. Stay till the end, because this twist shocked everyone, especially him. My name is Edith. I'm 31. I work as a dental hygienist in a small clinic across town in a place called Riverton. I pay my own bills, file my own taxes, and I haven't asked my parents for a dime since I was 19. I thought independence would earn me respect in my family. It didn't. In the Chambers family, love came with rankings, and I was always last. My older brother Keith was the golden child, the future, the one who needed more support. And I was the practice run, good for chores, good for being quiet, good for being told. You'll understand someday. When Keith turned 16, my parents surprised him with a brand new SUV in the driveway, shiny paint, giant bow, the kind of moment neighbors peek through curtains to watch. When I turned 16, I got Keith's old bike, bent wheel, squeaky chain, and a lecture about gratitude. When Keith went away to college, my parents bragged like they were sponsors of a celebrity. When I went to community college, they called it practical, the way you describe a coupon. And I wish I could say I didn't care. But I did. The worst thing about being the overlooked child isn't the lack of gifts. It's how you start believing you deserve the lack of love. I carried that belief for years, until I met Troy Weston. Troy was steady in a way my family never was. He worked as a diesel mechanic, came home tired, hands rough, heart soft. When he listened, he didn't interrupt to win. When he promised something, he kept it. That alone felt unreal to me. The first time Troy met my parents, he tried so hard. Clean shirt, polite smile, a small bouquet for my mother, Phillies. My mom accepted the flowers like they were a test she hadn't studied for. My father, Gordon Chambers, shook Troy's hand with the cold politeness you use on a stranger who parked too close to your mailbox. Troy's crime in their eyes was simple. He wasn't rich, and he treated me like I mattered. We got married quietly, just a few people, no drama. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't begging to be chosen. Then our daughter Rosie was born. Rosie had dark hair, loud lungs, and tiny fists that balled up like she came into the world already ready to fight for her place in it. I remember holding her and thinking, I will never let anyone make her feel the way I felt. My parents barely reacted. My mother sent one text, "Congrats!" with a period. My father didn't call. Keith replied with one lazy emoji and nothing else, like my baby was a group chat update. But there was one person who would have cared deeply. My grandmother, Nell Chambers, Gordon's mother. Nell was the kind of woman who built wealth slowly, stubbornly, and honestly. Over decades, she'd bought a handful of small rental units in our region. Nothing flashy, just practical properties that she repaired and managed herself. She kept handwritten notes, color-coded folders, and somehow always knew who paid rent early and who was about to be late. And then, a few years earlier, my father told everyone Nell had advanced dementia. He said she was confused, paranoid, not safe to live alone, so he moved her into a care facility called Sycamore Ridge and became her power of attorney. He spoke with such calm authority that nobody questioned him, especially not me. That guilt lives in my throat even now, like a stone I can't swallow. Because I trusted him. And that trust almost cost me my child. It started with a family meeting. One evening in late summer, my father called and said we all needed to be at the family home on Hawthorne Drive in Briarhaven. He said it was about Grandma Nell's estate and making sure everything is fair. When he said the word fair, something in my stomach tightened. I didn't see it coming, but I should have. Troy and I drove over after my shift. We left Rosie with Troy's mother because I didn't want distractions. I didn't want my baby in that house if voices got loud. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and cooked meat. the two scents my mother used when she wanted to pretend our family was normal. Gordon sat at the dining table with a folder in front of him. Phyllis stood behind him like a quiet guard. Keith slouched in a chair, pale and twitchy, eyes darting like he hadn't slept in days. My father didn't waste time. He opened the folder and started talking about Nell's trust. He said Nell had created a clause. A clause that would determine who got the family home and most of the property income. Then he looked directly at me and said, "Because you have a child, you qualify." Keith's head snapped up. My father continued, smooth as oil, "But there's an easy solution." And that's when the room changed. He slid a paper toward me and said I had two options. Option 1, I signed temporary custody of Rosie over to Keith, just on paper, just long enough to qualify him as the primary caregiver of a minor child for the trust clause. Option 2, I sign away my inheritance claim entirely. Either way, Keith would get what Gordon called what he deserves. For a second, I honestly thought I misheard him. My brain searched for the joke, the twist, the misunderstanding. But my father's face didn't move. He was asking me to hand my infant daughter to my brother, like she was a key you pass to someone, so they can open a door you're not allowed to enter. And Keith didn't even look ashamed. Phyllis stepped in fast. She touched my arm with the gentle grip she used when she wanted to appear loving while actually trapping you in place. She said, "Edith, this isn't about you. Keith needs this. You have Troy, you have stability. Family takes care of family." I stared at her and felt something old and bitter rise in my chest. Family takes care of family. Where was that speech when I needed help with tuition? When my car broke down and I walked to work for 2 weeks? When I graduated and nobody came because Keith needed something? But now I was supposed to sacrifice my child to save my brother from the consequences of his own choices. Because yes, choices. Keith's life had been a string of bad luck that somehow always required someone else's money. He'd lost jobs, burned friendships. His marriage to Janelle ended in a wreck of broken promises and unpaid bills. Rumors followed him, gambling, loans, late-night disappearances. And my parents' solution wasn't to help him grow up. It was to hand him my baby like a life raft. Troy didn't argue, he didn't shout, his jaw just tightened. And he said quietly, "We're leaving." He put his hand on my back and walked me out like he was guiding me through a fire. I thought that would be the end. But that wasn't the worst part. The next morning, my phone turned into a weapon. My mother sent long messages about loyalty and sacrifice. My father left short voicemails with cold deadlines. Keith sent pathetic texts pretending this was normal, saying things like, "I'll take good care of Rosie," as if that was a favor and not a threat. And my father's deadline stayed the same. September 19th. He said if I did do the right thing by then, he'd make it difficult. He didn't explain. He didn't have to. Gordon's whole power came from implication, from the way he made you feel like he had options you didn't. For days, I tried to breathe through it, tried to focus on my work, my baby, my marriage. But every time my phone buzzed, my stomach dropped. Then one afternoon, I drove past my parents' house and saw something that made my skin go cold. A brand new luxury pickup truck sat in the driveway, and through the window I could see renovation work, fresh counters, new fixtures, shiny things that weren't there before. My father didn't make that kind of money. So I asked myself one question that changed everything. Where did that money come from? I didn't confront him, not yet. Something in me knew that if I went in emotional, he'd win, he'd twist it, he'd paint me as unstable. Troy wanted to go over there and demand answers, but I stopped him. Because I knew my father. Gordon lived for the moment someone else lost control, so he could point and say, "See, that's the problem." So I did something different. I got organized. I gathered every important document we had, birth certificates, insurance, lease papers, bank statements. I put copies into a small fireproof lockbox. It felt dramatic until you've been threatened by your own family. Then it feels like oxygen. And still, even then, I didn't know what was really happening. Not until the call. Her name was Patris Acaffer, and she was a nurse at Sycamore Ridge. She spoke carefully, like she was stepping around something fragile. She told me she found my number on an old emergency contact form that my grandmother had filled out years ago, before my father took over everything. Patris said, "Edith, I'm calling because I have concerns about your grandmother's situation." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I asked, "Is she getting worse?" There was a pause on the line. Then Patris said, "Your grandmother does not have advanced dementia." I pulled over so fast, I didn't even remember doing it. But my father said, "I know what your father said," Patris replied. "And I know what your grandmother can do. She runs a book group. She keeps track of staff schedules. She remembers names. She remembers dates." My throat went dry. Patris explained that Nell's chart described severe cognitive decline and paranoia, and it instructed staff to restrict stimulation and visitors, for the power of attorney holders' instructions. My father's instructions. But Patris couldn't reconcile the chart with the woman she saw every day. Nell wasn't confused. She wasn't lost. She was angry. And she kept telling staff the same thing. "My son is stealing from me." But because Gordon had labeled her paranoid, every time she told the truth, they wrote it down as a symptom. I didn't see it coming. A woman can be robbed in plain sight if the right person convinces everyone she's unreliable. Patris said she was a mandated reporter. If she suspected elder exploitation, she had to act. So she dug up old paperwork and called the only number she could find. Mine. 2 days later, I visited Sycamore Ridge while my father was at work. Patris walked me down a quiet hallway and stopped at a door marked 14B. She knocked once and opened it. My grandmother sat in a chair by the window reading a thick mystery novel, glasses low on her nose. She looked smaller than I remembered, thinner, like life had been shaved off her. But her eyes were sharp. She looked up and said, clear as day, "Edith." No hesitation, no confusion, just my name. I started crying before I even stepped inside. I brought Rosie with me in a carrier because I was breastfeeding and she went where I went. When I lifted Rosie into Nell's arms, my grandmother's hands trembled, not from weakness, but from emotion so big it made her body shake. Nobody told her I had a baby. Not in 3 years. She stared at Rosie's face like she was trying to memorize it to make up for lost time. Then she smiled and said Rosie had her nose and apologized because it wasn't her best feature. I laughed so hard I startled myself. Then Nell's expression changed. She got still, focused, businesslike. And she said, "Now tell me what my son is doing." So I did. I told her about the trust clause, about the custody papers, about the September deadline, about Gordon's demand that I get rid of my child without even knowing yet that he'd say it out loud later. Nell listened. Then she said something that turned my blood cold. "That clause isn't mine." She told me her original trust was simple, a clean split between me and Keith. 50-50. No conditions about having children, no caregiver loopholes. She said her attorney was a man named Warren Healy, and she trusted him because he was meticulous and boring in the way you want an estate attorney to be. Then she said Gordon fired Warren and hired a new attorney, Glenn Fisk. Nell didn't choose him, Gordon did. Nell explained that after Gordon took power of attorney, he made updates to the trust. He claimed Nell approved them. He claimed she understood. But Nell said she never signed anything like what Gordon described. Then Nell told me about the money. Her rental units brought in steady monthly income, enough to pay for her care, keep her comfortable, and still build a future for her grandkids. But for years, her account deposits were far lower than expected. Thousands missing each month. And when she questioned it, Gordon told her she was confused. Then he took her phone. Then he restricted visitors. Then he told the facility she was paranoid. a perfect cage made of paperwork. Sitting in that room, watching my grandmother hold my baby, I felt something I can only describe as a switch flipping. The fear that kept me polite with my parents snapped, and in its place was clarity. I wasn't just fighting for inheritance. I was fighting for my grandmother's life, my baby's safety, and my own dignity. That night, I sat in my car with Rosie asleep in her seat and my hands shaking on the wheel. I made one decision. I wasn't going to scream at Gordon. I wasn't going to beg Phillies to love me. I was going to beat them with the only language they respected. Proof. Documents. The next day, I called Warren Healy. His office was in an older building over a small lunch spot, the kind of place that smelled like paper. Coffee and seriousness. Warren was gray-haired, calm, and direct. When I explained what was happening, his face changed in small increments. Confusion, concern, then anger so controlled it scared me more than shouting. He pulled Nell's original trust from his files. It was exactly what Nell said, 50-50, clean, fair. Then I showed him the modified documents Gordon had presented at the family meeting. Warren read them slowly. Then he looked up and said, "These changes are highly questionable." He didn't say it dramatically. He said it like a doctor, delivering a diagnosis. Warren explained something important. Power of attorney doesn't give someone the right to rewrite a trust for their own benefit, especially if the person is competent, and especially if the changes don't serve the person's interests. And if Nell was competent, if she could understand and make decisions, then Gordon's entire storyline collapsed. So we needed to prove competence. Warren arranged an independent geriatric assessment with Dr. Salazar, a specialist who didn't know my family, didn't care about our drama, and wouldn't be manipulated by tears or charm. Dr. Salazar met with Nell, ran cognitive tests, memory recall, reasoning exercises, practical decision-making questions. Nell passed. Not barely, not for her age. She passed like a woman who'd been underestimated her whole life and was tired of it. Dr. Salazar wrote a formal report. Nell Chambers was competent to manage her own affairs. And in a separate note, Dr. Salazar wrote that Nell's isolation, no phone, restricted visitors, sole control by a family member, raised red flags consistent with elder exploitation. That report felt like a key in my hand. But that wasn't the worst part. Because then we followed the money. Nell still remembered her online banking login. Of course she did. With Patris's help, we accessed her account history, pulled deposit records, compared them to expected rental income. Warren helped us request additional statements the facility couldn't access. I spent nights at my kitchen table with a laptop, receipts, notes, and a growing sense of nausea. Month after month, money was missing. Not a little. Thousands. We built a spreadsheet, property by property, month by month. The total over several years was enormous, enough to explain the new truck, the renovations, the confidence in my father's voice when he threatened me. And it wasn't just a mistake. Transfers led to an account under Gordon's name. Directly, Warren prepared filings, a petition to revoke Gordon's power of attorney, to restore Nell's original trust, and a formal complaint to the County Elder Exploitation Unit. Quietly, legally, and completely. And then we waited. Because my father had given me a deadline. September 19th. So we used his deadline against him. I pretended to hesitate. I called Gordon and let my voice shake a little. I said I was thinking about it, that I understood how hard this was for Keith. Gordon softened in the way manipulators soften when they think you're about to fold. He told me he knew I'd do the right thing. I hung up and stared at my phone like it was contaminated. Troy watched me from the doorway, and I could tell he wanted to drive over there and end it with one sentence, but I shook my head. Not yet, I told him, not until it counts. We made a plan for the meeting. Troy didn't trust Gordon, and honestly, neither did I anymore. Warren, Patris, and Nell would be nearby ready, not to cause a scene. To witness, to protect, to make sure Gordon couldn't rewrite reality again. The night before September 19th, I stood over Rosie's crib and watched her sleep. Her tiny hands were curled like she was holding onto courage she didn't even know she had yet. I whispered, "I'm going to protect you, no matter who I have to protect you from." I didn't sleep. September 19th arrived like a storm that had been gathering for years. We drove to Hawthorne Drive in the early evening. Rosie came with us this time. She wouldn't take a bottle, and honestly, a small part of me still had a stupid hope my parents might see their granddaughter and become human. That hope died fast. The house smelled like coffee and cleaner. No warm dinner smell, no performance. Phyllis sat at the dining table with her hands folded, eyes down, like she'd already chosen her side and didn't want to look at the cost. Gordon stood with the folder open, thicker this time. More forms, more lines to sign away my life. Keith sat in the corner, jittery, eyes hollow. He didn't look like a man ready to raise a baby. He looked like a man who would grab anything floating, even if it pulled someone else under. My father tapped the paper and said, "Last chance." He said he'd been patient. He said he'd been fair. He said all I had to do was sign custody over temporarily or sign away my inheritance claim, and then we could move on as a family. I looked at him and felt something strange. Not rage. Not fear. Clarity. I said no. Just that, no speech, no begging, no explanation. Then I picked up Rosie's car seat and turned toward the hallway. And that's when Gordon moved. What happened next changed everything. He stepped in front of me at the top of the stairs, blocking the narrow space like a wall. His voice went low, controlled, the voice that had ruled my childhood with silent threats. "You don't understand what you're doing," he said. "You don't understand what's at stake." I tried to step around him. He grabbed my shoulders. Hard. His fingers dug in like he wasn't holding a daughter. He was holding property. I shifted the car seat in my left hand, instinctively angling Rosie away from him. And then Gordon shoved me. My heel caught the edge of the top step. My right hand shot out for the railing. I twisted my body around Rosie like my spine was a shield, because motherhood doesn't think, it reacts. My back hit the stairs. I slid down a few steps. Carpet burned through my shirt. Pain snapped through my wrist like a bright wire. Rosie screamed. That baby scream that makes your blood turn to ice. And from the top of the stairs, my father looked down at me with his face twisted in something I'd never seen before, pure entitlement. He shouted, "The inheritance is Keith's. Get rid of that child." Phyllis appeared in the doorway. She didn't move. She didn't run to me. She didn't scream at Gordon. She just stood there with a hand over her mouth, frozen, watching it happen like she was watching weather. 31 years of choosing silence. Perfectly consistent to the end. Troy came around the corner fast. He dropped to my side, checked Rosie first, hands gentle but urgent. Rosie was crying, but she was safe. The car seat did its job. My body did the rest. Troy stood up between me and the staircase like a shield. Then he pulled out his phone. And here's the part my father didn't expect. Troy didn't threaten. He didn't negotiate. He dialed. "I'm calling the police," Troy said. Loud enough for everyone to hear. For a split second, Gordon's confidence flickered. Like a man, realizing the rules he wrote might not apply anymore. Troy typed one word into a text and sent it. Now. 90 seconds later, the front door opened. Warren Healy walked in first, calm, carrying a briefcase. Behind him was Patris Aquifer in scrubs. And behind Patris, moving slowly, with a cane, with her chin lifted like she'd been waiting years for this exact moment, was Nell Chambers. My grandmother. Alive, clear-eyed, fully present. The woman my father told the world was gone. Gordon's face, drained of color so fast it looked unreal. Not shock. Not anger. Fear. The fear of a liar, watching the truth walk into the room. Keith dropped the mug he'd been holding. It shattered on the floor, and nobody moved to clean it up. Phyllis sank into a chair like her knees stopped working. Nell didn't yell. She didn't cry. She walked into the dining room, sat at the table like she belonged there, because she did, and looked at Gordon like he was something she needed to finally name correctly. Warren opened his briefcase and placed a folder in front of Gordon. Inside were documents: the original trust, the altered version, bank records, financial summaries, and Dr. Salazar's assessment proving Nell was competent. There was also a stamped copy, the formal complaint filed days earlier. Gordon stared at the pages like his eyes couldn't translate them into reality. And I watched the exact moment he understood. He hadn't lost tonight. He'd lost earlier. And everything since then had just been him walking around in a collapsing building, pretending it was still standing. Nell finally spoke. Her voice was steady, not loud, and somehow that made it worse. "Gordon," she said, "I raised you, and I have never been more ashamed of anything in my life." 7 words. That's all it took to break the man who thought he owned everyone. Troy called the police anyway. When officers arrived, they documented my injuries, took photos, and recorded statements. Gordon tried to claim I fell. The officers didn't argue on the spot. They just wrote down everything and told me how to pursue charges through the proper channels. Warren didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He simply informed them that elder exploitation reports had already been filed and that the estate attorney had documentation of possible financial crimes. Gordon's mouth opened, then closed. No script left. We left that house without saying goodbye. Because there was nothing left to negotiate with people who would trade a baby for money. The next few weeks weren't cinematic. They were paperwork. Interviews, statements, records, frozen accounts, legal proceedings. And that's where the real revenge lived. Not in screaming. In consequences. Investigators traced the transfers. Accounts connected back to Gordon. Enough evidence piled up that even the best excuses couldn't hold the weight. Charges followed: elder exploitation, theft by deception, and because of what happened on the stairs with Rosie in my arms, additional charges for endangering a child and assault. Gordon tried to bargain. He tried to blame stress. He tried to suggest Nell was confused and everyone was overreacting. But Dr. Salazar's report sat on the table like a brick. And bank records don't care about charm. Then another truth surfaced, and it hit me in a different place. My mother had a separate account. Not under the family's usual bank. Under her maiden name. Small deposits had been flowing into it for a long time. Phyllis hadn't just watched it happen. She benefited. Every guilt message she sent me about sacrifice, she sent with stolen money sitting quietly in her own name. I didn't feel triumphant when that came out. I felt hollow. Because betrayal from a father is one kind of pain. Betrayal from a mother who watched you get shoved downstairs and still chose him is another. The legal system moved the way it always moves, slow until it is. Gordon eventually faced the consequences. His job disappeared the moment the charges became official. His accounts were locked down. His image, the one he curated so carefully, collapsed in front of people he'd spent years impressing. Phyllis avoided prison through cooperation, but she couldn't avoid what mattered most to her, everyone knowing. Nell regained control of her life. Her phone was returned, visitor restrictions removed, power of attorney revoked. She moved to a better place, one she chose herself, closer to me, where she hosted her Scrabble nights without asking permission from anyone. And Keith. Here, where the story didn't turn into a cartoon villain ending. Nell didn't erase him. She redefined him. She restored the trust to what it was supposed to be, 50-50. But she added one condition herself, legally and clearly. Keith wouldn't receive his share until he completed a treatment program and demonstrated stability over time. If he refused, his share would be redirected into a charitable trust. For the first time in his life, nobody could rescue him with a check. He had to rescue himself. And I don't pretend that fixed everything. But it was something real, accountability. As for me and Troy, we sold any emotional claim we had to that old family house the moment my father's hands shoved me backward. Some homes hold too many ghosts, and I don't mean the spooky kind. I mean the kind that whisper, "You don't matter, you don't deserve safety, you should surrender." We took my portion of what was rightfully Nell's plan all along and bought a modest home in a quieter neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, a small yard, a garage Troy immediately turned into his little kingdom of tools and order. The first morning in our new kitchen, I made eggs while Rosie babbled in her high chair. Sunlight hit the counter, and nothing smelled like lemon cleaner trying to cover dysfunction. I cried, not because I was broken, but because I was. Troy walked in, saw my face, and asked if I burned breakfast. That's Troy. Steady. Grounded. Normal in a way that heals you slowly. Sometimes I think about that staircase and how it split my life into 2 versions. Before, the daughter still trying to earn a place at a table that never had a seat for her. After, the mother who understood that love without safety isn't love, it's control. If there's a lesson in what happened, it's this. People who rely on fear want you emotional, confused, and alone. So you do the opposite. You document, you get support, you tell the truth out loud, you choose your child over your parents' approval, you choose your dignity over their version of loyalty. And if someone ever tries to make you feel guilty for protecting your baby, your peace, or your future, remember this. Family isn't the people who demand your sacrifice. Family is the people who would never ask for it. This story is fictional and for entertainment purposes only, but the lesson is real. If you felt something while listening, please like the video, subscribe for more emotional justice stories, and comment what you would have done if your own father tried to trade your child for an inheritance.